The crowd buzzed with anticipation, their murmurs a restless tide beneath the glittering lights of the packed arena. Cameras panned across the sea of faces, capturing everything from wide-eyed disbelief to clenched jaws and restless tapping fingers. Tonight was no ordinary fight. It was the clash of eras and encounter between a legend whose name had become synonymous with raw power and a formidable force whose skill had already carved him a place among boxing's elite. On one side of the ring stood Mike Tyson, a man whose presence alone had once struck fear into the hearts of countless opponents. Though years had passed since his prime, the aura surrounding him had only intensified with age, a testament to a legacy built on brutality, speed, and sheer dominance. His eyes, sharp and calculating, held that same dangerous glint, as if the fire within had never truly cooled. Across from him stood Joseph Parker, a fighter known for his resilience and tactical precision. Younger, fresher, but by no means untested. Parker had weathered storms before facing giants of the sport, both physically and metaphorically. Yet, facing Tyson was different. There was a weight to the occasion, a sense of history clawing at his chest. He was no novice, but even he couldn't ignore the gravity of what lay ahead. For all his training, all his years in the ring, nothing could have prepared him for the reality of sharing the stage with Mike Tyson. The promotion for the fight had been a spectacle in itself. Pundits debated endlessly, their words stoking the fires of curiosity and doubt. Could Parker, with his agile footwork and clinical counterpunching, outmaneuver the relentless power of Tyson? Would Tyson's years away from the ring dull the ferocity that had once defined him, or would muscle memory and instinct prove more potent than ever? The questions swirled, unanswered, driving fans into a frenzy of speculation. Everyone had their theories, but no one truly knew. Tyson's return had been met with both admiration and skepticism. Some praised him for his courage, for the sheer audacity of stepping back into the squared circle when so many others would have remained in the comfort of retirement. Others, however, questioned his motives, hinting at desperation or a yearning for the glory that had once seemed unending. For Tyson, it was simpler than that. The ring was where he felt most alive, where everything else, pain, joy, regret, blurred into the singular pursuit of victory. And against Parker, he would prove, if only to himself, that the beast within had never truly been tamed. Parker, meanwhile, had his own motivations. Dismissing the fight as merely another payday would be an insult to everything he had worked for. It wasn't just about defeating a legend. It was about seizing the moment, claiming his place among the greats. To do that, he had to stand his ground against one of the most intimidating men to ever lace up a pair of gloves. The challenge was immense, but so was Parker's resolve. He had endured grueling training camps, pushing his body to its limits, refining every aspect of his game. Yet, beneath the calm professionalism, there lingered a gnawing sense of uncertainty. After all, Tyson was Tyson. Predictability had never been part of his arsenal. The night of the fight carried an electric tension, the kind that only surfaces when something extraordinary is about to unfold. Reporters scrambled for last-minute interviews. Trainers barked instructions drowned out by the noise of the crowd, and the fighters themselves went through their final preparations. Parker wrapped his hands in silence, his expression unreadable. Tyson, meanwhile, moved with a casual confidence that belied the intensity of his gaze. Both men knew the significance of what was to come, and both understood that once the bell rang, only their fists would do the talking. As they approached the ring, the difference in their demeanors was palpable. Parker walked with purpose, his shoulders squared, eyes forward. Tyson, on the other hand, appeared almost tranquil, as if he had already accepted whatever outcome lay ahead. To the spectators, it was a moment frozen in time, a collision of legends and contenders that would be spoken about for years to come. The referee's instructions were a mere formality. Their eyes locked, and in that instant, the crowd's roar faded into a distant hum. It was just them now, two men bound by their own ambitions, their own demons. Tyson's fists clenched, veins rippling beneath his skin. Parker inhaled deeply, the air tasting of sweat and adrenaline. And then the bell rang. Tyson exploded forward, a blur of muscle and aggression. His punches came in devastating combinations, the kind that had once shattered opponents with brutal efficiency. But Parker wasn't some overmatched rookie. He slipped, ducked, and retaliated, his own strikes landing with precision. They danced between the ropes, a furious exchange of will and skill. Every round seemed to push them further, testing not just their strength, but their resilience. Parker's youth and technique battled Tyson's experience and raw power. The canvas shook beneath their feet, the echoes of each blow carried by the gasps and cheers of the audience. Tyson's stamina was holding up better than many had predicted, his body moving with the fluidity of a man desperate to reclaim his former glory. Parker, meanwhile, was adapting on the fly, his sharp mind searching for the cracks in Tyson's ferocious onslaught. But then, something changed. Tyson's tempo intensified, his attacks more relentless than ever. Parker found himself on the defensive, his carefully planned counters unraveling under the sheer force of Tyson's assault. His guard wavered, his breathing labored. And in that moment, as Tyson unleashed another crushing hook, Tyson's hook tore through the air, a sledgehammer aimed to end the contest right there. Parker absorbed it, his arms shuddering under the impact, the force rattling through his bones. But he didn't crumble. Instead, he fired back, instinct overriding pain, a sharp jab cracking through Tyson's relentless offense. The crowd's roar swelled, disbelief mingling with excitement. Parker's resilience wasn't just holding, it was evolving, adapting under the pressure Tyson had so masterfully applied. His face bore the marks of their exchanges, but his eyes were alight with something deeper, determination sharpened by desperation. Tyson pressed forward, his aggression mounting with each passing moment. The years hadn't dulled his hunger. If anything, they had refined it into something colder, more calculated. His punches were like wrecking balls, each swing backed by a ferocity that dared Parker to break. Yet Parker danced through the chaos, his footwork weaving intricate patterns, his gloves flicking out with surgical precision. Where Tyson brought brute force, Parker countered with finesse, his speed and accuracy defying the narrative that many had written before the fight began. But just when it seemed Parker had found his rhythm, Tyson's strategy shifted. He began cutting off the ring, narrowing Parker's escape routes, his footwork deceptively agile for a man whose reputation had been built on pure, destructive power. Every feint, every subtle movement was designed to trap Parker against the ropes where Tyson's strength would be undeniable. It was a ruthless tactic, and it was working. Parker's breathing grew heavier, his movements less fluid. The frustration etched across his features, betrayed the struggle to find a way through Tyson's tightening grip. Then came the unexpected. As the fight neared its midpoint, Tyson's relentless pace showed the first signs of strain. A slight hesitation, a momentary stumble after delivering a particularly vicious combination. The crowd noticed it, their cheers faltering before surging back with renewed vigor. Parker's corner shouted instructions, their voices sharp and urgent. They had seen it too, the subtle crack in Tyson's armor. And Parker, seizing on that fleeting moment of weakness, launched an assault of his own. Hooks and crosses rained down, sharp and punishing, his fists darting like vipers. Tyson absorbed the hits, his guard raised but not unbreakable. Parker's punches weren't just deflecting Tyson's power, they were testing his endurance, forcing the older fighter to confront the brutal demands of stamina. For all his experience, all his raw talent, Tyson was now fighting not just Parker, but the relentless ticking of the clock. The crowd sensed the shift, their chants growing wild, torn between loyalty to a legend and admiration for the challenger's resilience. Yet Tyson's pride was as fierce as ever. Shaking off the fatigue, he dug deep, his eyes narrowing with the kind of focus that only years of battle could forge. His counters grew sharper, his defenses more impenetrable. The ring became a battlefield where every inch was contested with a ferocity that bordered on desperation. Neither man willing to yield, neither willing to show the other even a hint of weakness. But just as Parker began to adapt to Tyson's adjustments, another twist shattered the pattern of their duel. In the chaos of an exchange, Tyson's ankle twisted awkwardly, a misstep so brief that many in the audience missed it entirely. Yet Parker saw it, the momentary grimace that flickered across Tyson's face. It was the kind of error that could change everything. Tyson's movements remained fierce, but there was a stiffness to his footing, a struggle to mask the injury. Parker's mind raced, calculating how to exploit the vulnerability without exposing himself to Tyson's still lethal counters. Emboldened by the discovery, Parker turned aggressive, pressing forward with a ferocity that caught Tyson off guard. It was a gamble, but one Parker felt compelled to take. His punches came faster, heavier, his intent no longer just to survive but to conquer. Tyson retaliated, his fists still thunderous, but there was a strain in his expression that hadn't been there before. The tide of the fight was shifting, the balance tipping with each brutal exchange. Parker's confidence grew, his strikes landing with increasing precision. Yet Tyson's power remained a looming threat, the kind of force that could end the contest with a single, perfectly placed blow. The audience could sense it, their cheers now a frenzied mix of admiration and dread. No one dared to blink, afraid they might miss the moment everything unraveled. Tyson's grimace deepened, his footwork suffering from the injury he had tried so desperately to hide. Parker exploited it, circling to Tyson's weakened side, launching combinations designed to test his balance. But even wounded, Tyson's resilience was unmatched. He continued to lash out, refusing to yield, his punches still echoing through the arena like the beat of some terrible drum. Just when Parker thought he had the upper hand, Tyson unleashed a counter that nearly buckled his knees. The blow came from nowhere, the result of pure instinct and muscle memory. Parker staggered, his vision blurring for a split second, his heartbeat thundering in his ears. Tyson surged forward, his eyes blazing with the kind of intensity that had destroyed so many challengers before. Injury or not, he was still dangerous, perhaps even more so, driven by the knowledge that time was running out. But Parker recovered, his resolve hardening. This wasn't just a fight anymore. It was a test of survival, of who could endure longer, who could withstand the punishment the other dealt out. The crowd's noise was a storm now, voices rising and crashing with each brutal exchange. Trainers screamed from the corners, their words drowned out by the sheer ferocity of what was unfolding in the ring. Parker's fists continued their assault, his strategy evolving on the fly, adapting to Tyson's every adjustment. But the danger remained ever present, Tyson's power lurking beneath every movement, every twitch of muscle. And all the while, Parker couldn't shake the feeling that the true danger lay not in Tyson's fists, but in his unwavering determination to reclaim what he believed was still his. And then, with the fight seemingly balanced on a knife's edge, Parker attempted something he had never dared before, a risky maneuver meant to exploit Tyson's injury once and for all. His timing had to be perfect, his execution flawless. But just as he committed to the move, Tyson's eyes flashed with a brilliance that suggested the predator had been lying in wait all along. Parker's fist snapped out, a jab meant to bait Tyson's wounded side, to force the legend into overcommitting. It was a calculated move, the culmination of every adjustment Parker had made throughout the brutal contest. Tyson lunged forward, his eyes blazing, his fists cutting through the air with the kind of precision only experience could forge. But Parker saw a subtle hesitation in Tyson's step, the faintest flinch that betrayed his pain. Parker capitalized, unloading a combination that seemed to rattle the very air around them. Tyson absorbed the punishment, his shoulders rolling with the impact, but something had shifted. The aggression that had defined his onslaught was now tinged with caution, a restraint born not from doubt, but necessity. Every strike he delivered was backed by raw power, But there was a hesitation beneath it, a calculated awareness of his own vulnerability. Parker could see it, feel it in the way Tyson's movements had grown just a fraction slower, his stance a shade less balanced. Parker pressed harder, refusing to let Tyson find his rhythm again. His fists flew with a precision born of desperation and instinct, his strikes aimed to dismantle Tyson's defenses piece by piece. The crowd's roars blurred into a single, thunderous wave, their collective energy fueling the war that unfolded before their eyes. Parker's determination had transformed into something feral, a hunger to prove himself against a legend who had cast a shadow over the sport for decades. But Tyson wasn't finished. Injured, exhausted, and cornered, his spirit burned brighter than ever. With a roar that seemed to silence the entire arena, he launched himself forward, his fists carving vicious arcs through the air. Parker reeled, forced to retreat as Tyson's power threatened to overwhelm him. The audience erupted, their cheers a wild, uncontrollable force that shook the very ground beneath them. Tyson's attack was relentless, his strikes crashing against Parker's guard like battering rams. But Parker held firm, his defense tight, his resolve unyielding. And then, just when it seemed Tyson's resurgence would crush Parker's hopes entirely, something remarkable happened. As Tyson's power flared, his injured ankle betrayed him. Mid-combination, his footing slipped, the pain shooting through his leg like fire. It was a flaw so minuscule it could have gone unnoticed, but Parker's eyes caught it with brutal clarity. He seized the opportunity, unleashing a counterpunch that cracked against Tyson's jaw with a force that sent shockwaves through the crowd. Tyson stumbled, his legs faltering beneath him. For a heartbeat, the arena held its breath, the spectacle suspended in a moment of disbelief. But Tyson didn't fall. His hands raised, his gaze locked onto Parker with a determination that defied pain and exhaustion alike. It was the resilience of a man who had built his legacy from the ashes of defeat more than once. But Parker had found his opening, and he refused to let it slip away. He pressed forward, his fists hammering against Tyson's defenses with a speed and precision that bordered on merciless. Tyson fought back, his counters wild and vicious, but his strength was fading. Parker's strategy had chipped away at his endurance, his movements growing sluggish under the weight of the damage he had sustained. As the final rounds approached, Parker's momentum became unstoppable. His strikes landed clean and sharp, each one finding its mark with ruthless efficiency. Tyson's efforts to retaliate grew desperate, his punches lacking the precision that had once defined his dominance. The crowd's noise had become a chaotic blur, their allegiance torn between respect for the legend and admiration for the challenger's unyielding will. And then, with the bout nearing its conclusion, Parker delivered a combination that shattered Tyson's defenses entirely. A hook, followed by a cross, then another jab that snapped Tyson's head back. Tyson's knees buckled, his body swaying under the assault. The referee hovered nearby, eyes sharp and ready to intervene if Tyson could no longer protect himself. But Tyson refused to fall. His fists remained clenched, his eyes burning with the defiance of a man who refused to be broken. Even as his strength waned, his resolve only grew stronger, his pride refusing to let him surrender. Parker hesitated, his fists poised to deliver the finishing blow, but something about Tyson's resilience gave him pause. And in that moment of hesitation, Tyson launched one final counterattack. It was reckless, born from desperation rather than calculation, but it carried the kind of raw power that had once made him unstoppable. Parker took the hit, his head snapping back, his vision swimming. But he remained standing, his feet rooted to the canvas as if sheer will alone kept him upright. The bell rang, a sound both triumphant and mournful. The fight had ended not with a knockout, but with a test of endurance that had pushed both men to their limits. Tyson's shoulders sagged, his breathing ragged, but there was a flicker of satisfaction in his eyes, a recognition that Parker had earned his respect in the most brutal arena imaginable. Parker's chest heaved, his body aching from the punishment he had endured, but his gaze remained steady, his victory as much a testament to his resilience as it was to his skill. The announcer's voice boomed over the speakers, declaring Parker the victor by unanimous decision. The crowd's roar was deafening, their approval washing over Parker like a tidal wave. But even as his hand was raised in triumph, Parker's attention remained fixed on Tyson. The legend met his gaze, nodding once with a respect that transcended words. But just as Parker allowed himself to bask in the glory of his hard-fought victory, a commotion erupted from the corner of the ring. Trainers and officials swarmed Tyson's side, their expressions etched with concern. Parker's triumph was tinged with unease, a question lingering at the edge of his mind. Had Tyson's injury been more severe than anyone realized? Had their battle pushed him beyond his limits in a way that could not be undone? And as the medical team escorted Tyson from the ring, Parker felt a chill settle over him. The fight had ended, but the consequences of their brutal clash were only beginning to unfold.